Welcome to Broadcasting Common Ground, the Deep Foundation Institute's podcast channel. In this series, Interview with a Trailblazer, hosts Tim Siegel and Lucky Nagarajan will be talking with leaders who forged their own paths within the Deep Foundations industry.
Welcome to DFI's podcast, Broadcasting Common Ground. I'm Tim, and I'm here with my co-host, Lucky. Hi, Lucky.
Hi, Tim.
And welcome, DFI podcast listeners. This is our third episode in our series called Interview with a Trailblazer. In this episode, we will be discussing the personal and professional challenges that we all face moving through our careers. Given this, it can be helpful to hear the stories and wisdom from others who are having or have had similar experience and overcome those challenges. We call them trailblazers. Lucky, today we're going to discuss seasons within our engineering careers from entry level to senior principal. Each season has parts that are difficult and parts that are easier. Our two guests are in different seasons in their journey and will be sharing their wisdom. We will be talking about the joy of entering the industry after graduating, uncertainties of career path decisions, and especially as we move into parenthood, common stressors for professionals, and a way to balance family and to minimize the impact as we transition from field to office. And then finally, marching toward our goals overall and much more.
That is very true, Tim. One thing to note for our listeners is that the stories and discussions will be mainly based on individual experiences. While we may all go through each of the different phases in our career, we all have different and each unique phase for each of us. The experiences of our guests should not be considered as typical or generalizing of the phases or the seasons. Our trailblazers in this episode are Sarah Ramp and Matt Glisson, whom we know as Super Matt. Sarah is a mother of two and is a senior design engineer at Menard Group. Matt is DFI Director of Technical Activities and a father of two as well. They both will be taking us on a cruise into their career journey. Welcome, Sarah and Matt.
Thank you, Lucky. Tim. Happy to be here.
Same. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to you both. We'll jump right into it, but I'd like to start with Sarah. Sarah, I understand that you are a graduate of Carnegie Mellon. Are you originally from Western Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am. So I was born and raised in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, an only child in a very working class family. I've never lived anywhere else.
So what have influenced you to choose Carnegie Mellon?
So a little more of my background. Neither of my parents graduated from college or university, but they always really valued education and did everything that they possibly could to set me up to earn a degree. They gave me lots of opportunities to excel, supporting me in extracurriculars and, from everything from Rocket Club to Math League. These days, STEM is really emphasized in school. My kindergartner takes STEM class once a week, which is amazing to me, but we didn't have that when I was growing up. I had never met an engineer before. I had no exposure to the engineering field, and I certainly hadn't heard of geotechnical engineering. Honestly, I really liked physics and math, and someone mentioned to me my senior year of high school, engineers have lots of job opportunities and they get paid well. So that sold me, money. And so I checked out schools that had engineering programs. Being, from a close-knit family, not a huge risk taker, I only applied to schools within about a 2-hour radius of home. So Carnegie Mellon had a great reputation, and I ultimately, chose it for those reasons.
Well, okay, so why civil engineering then? What
Yeah.
led you to that?
So, my first year of college, I didn't have a path. I didn't really have a goal besides getting a job. And so I got to try civil engineering, chemical engineering, mechanical, and I ended up choosing civil, mainly for the department. It was a relatively close-knit, small graduating class, about 30 people that I traveled through the program with for three and a half years. And, just really supportive, really fun people, great professors, very approachable. And, for me, that atmosphere is what sold me.
Very nice. Okay, that's super. All right. And here's the question. I'm gonna ask you, both you and Matt, this question. In retrospect, and think about this for a minute, but as a few words as possible, how would you describe your college experience?
Transformative.
Right.
Right. I mean, I think that's probably common for all of us, right? I mean, think about where you're coming from and where you end up in those 4 or 5, maybe sometimes 6 years. I hadn't had any construction experience before going to college and starting my co-op when I was at Marquette and going out in the field and being around construction equipment. I mean, I guess you can count the playing with the Tonka trucks in the sandbox as a kid, maybe as my construction experience, and then helping Dad do some projects around the house, but nothing like the projects that I ended up working on in my co-op and then in the consulting career. So yeah, definitely transformative. I went in thinking I was going to be an environmental engineer, right? Change the world, save the world kind of thing. And then I had chemistry. In college, chemistry and I didn't get along nearly as well as I did with high school chemistry. So I veered away from that one and went from there. So yeah.
So you said transformative.
Transformative, yeah.
Right. All right, Sarah, how about you?
I would say lucky for a number of reasons. Yeah, like lucky. So I met my spouse the second week of classes, who was also a civil engineering major. So that was very lucky. And then also, I ended up receiving the DFI scholarship, and that opened a lot of doors for me.
Nice plug. We like that. That was
Yeah. And
I didn't have to pay her for that either.
That's right. Oh well.
I was going to ask you, Matt.
That's good.
That's a great journey, Sarah. It's so fascinating to see how you were introduced to geotech. I should say, coming from Indian background, in India, there are only two, this was like so many years ago, there were only two professions. One is like engineering and the other one is medicine. When you think of engineering, it's not even nowhere close to civil engineering. It's only software engineering. Everyone thinks about computer. And I think I've shared this story so many times. The first time I said that I was going to go into civil engineering program, my family was shocked. They were like, no, you have to go back to computer software engineering. So it's really, I had no clue about geotech as well. I did not know geotech. I just knew, there are different disciplines within civil engineering, but I had no clue that there was soils engineering or foundation engineering. So that's something that common, I think we have. And again, yeah, transformative. I know you said you applied to the universities just right around your, where you lived and where you were born and lived. And I remember the time I took like 6 months to convince my father that I'm going to leave the country and go to a different country to do my master's. So that was not fun, but it happened. It happened. So, and thank you for sharing for our listeners that you were one of the DFI scholarship recipient. So just briefly, if you can tell us, after winning the scholarship of DFI, tell us a little bit more of the world of DFI that you have explored and what do you think?
Certainly. Can I kick my cat out of the room break?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be right back. Certainly. So, I owe my career and my, job satisfaction to the DFI. I don't know how many people can say that. I'm not, trying to put in an extra plug, but I really owe, the scholarship. So again, when I was in undergrad, I didn't have a plan. I didn't really have a concentration in civil engineering. Within civil, I tried to take as many electives as I could with a breadth of courses, including Intro to Geotechnical Engineering. After completing that course my senior year, I was notified that I had received the award. And it replaced some of my, other scholarships, like need-based aid that I had, so it wasn't like a windfall of cash, right? It wasn't about the money, but that recognition made it so that I actually met my employer. So Seth Perlman is an alum of the same school that I went to. And he was very active on the campus community, coming in for different events, and there was a luncheon between students and alumni. And, as a corporate sponsor of the DFI, he had heard that I received the award. And so he made a point to, sit next to me at the luncheon and introduce himself and basically like offered me a job on the spot. So,
Of course.
I wasn't seeking out a job in ground improvement or the deep foundations industry, but, it kind of just happened to me. And, obviously, there's a reason I've stayed, but, again, I got my start thanks to that recognition.
That's awesome. That's awesome. This definitely leads to the next question I had in mind. You started with some internships in traffic engineering, right? And then now you are a senior design engineer at Menard. Tell us, like, how did it happen, and how has the role changed over time?
Yeah, certainly. So before I connected with this job opportunity, I wasn't focused on geotech. I had done some internships, whatever jobs I could find in traffic engineering happened to be, my summer experience. But from that, I gained, exposure to different corporate cultures, small companies, big companies. And I learned that I prefer smaller companies where the employees have a lot of opportunities for growth and, exposure to different roles. And, Menard checked all of those boxes. Some I didn't even know I needed. So when I started at my current position, my current employer, I was hired as a field/design engineer. I spent about half of my time in the field and half in the office. On different job sites, checking quality control, running load testing. While I was in the office, I did sales and estimating, started to learn design. And so all of that, was kind of beautiful chaos. But I was in a phase of, planting the seeds for my career. There was a fair bit of travel. And my husband was in a position traveling as well. So, it was, hard to, deal with that. You miss your family, but, I was happy to just, gobble up any kind of experience I could. I didn't really set like boundaries, like professional, personal, I was just working like crazy. And, anyway, within about 2 years, my focus became design. And so I've grown as a designer ever since.
Good answer. All right, Matt, we're going to turn to you now a little bit.
You sure you're ready?
We're ready. Where are you from?
I grew up in Rochester, New York, and currently I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. So yeah, a few stops along the way in between.
All right. So where did you go to college?
So we mentioned Marquette University before. So that's in Milwaukee. And similar to Sarah, I met my now wife very early on. I don't know if it was the second week, but it wasn't long after that that we met. And then we wound up having a bunch of classes together second semester, freshman year. And I joke that I spent the next few months dating her and then the next 3 years trying to convince her to marry me. So yeah, so that worked out. That was pretty good. So yeah, started at Marquette. She decided she wanted to become a doctor And I had the marriage proposal, again, another joke that I have, but it's not totally far off of the truth either, is that the proposal when I agree to follow you if you agree to marry me. And luckily for me, she agreed. So we went to Charlottesville, Virginia, while she was doing med school at the University of Virginia. And that's where I wound up selecting geotechnical engineering. Up until that point, I was between structural and civil, or structural and geotech. I liked the geotech stuff in school, liked the foundation design and the uncertainty of it a little bit. And so trying to find a position in Charlottesville, not a big town. A lot of the job offers that I was getting were in Richmond, but there was this one firm by the name of Schnabel Engineering that was hiring a geotech in Charlottesville, and that went great with the interview, and they offered me a position, and I took it, and the rest, as they say, is history, and that as that goes, Tim. So
now you said you co-opt. Did you co-op at Marquette?
I did, yeah. The co-op was at Marquette with a company called Ganther Construction out of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Yes, the home of Oshkosh trucks and Oshkosh Bagosh clothing. So yeah, for the kids, right? So I was up there doing general contracting with them for most of my co-op. I did the very last term of my co-op. I actually worked at a nuclear power plant just outside of Rochester with the structural engineer there, doing some different structural design and things like that. So, yeah.
And your one word to describe your college experience was, what did you say it was? Transformative? Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Well, Lucky, I meant to ask you. We didn't get a chance. What's your one word to describe your college experience? Or you don't have to be one word. It can be as few words as possible.
I would say future dreams.
Really? Man, I like all this very positive energy. I got
transformative.
I got lucky. Mine is long. It's a long 5 years. And but it's true. I mean, I'm if I can tell you what happened each of those years and going into it, I mean, that was a long time. But now 5 years goes by like this.
I mean, well, at 20 years old, 5 years is a quarter of your life.
I've got socks in my drawer that have been there 5 years and I haven't worn them. But I'm just to give you a feel.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, Tim, like for us, I was completely thrilled. I was completely intrigued coming to this country, not knowing anything about.
I get it. That's exciting. No,
so it was nothing I had ever expected. Nothing I had ever dreamed about. So it's definitely future dreams, building your future dreams for me.
Good for you, Lucky. I'm glad. That's inspiring.
Yes. So we did talk about a little bit of your background, where you come from and what you do. So I want to dive right into some of the career challenges that we have had, right? So you both have been in the industry for a while and both are parents. Matt, you have 2 kids, ages 16 and 12. Sarah, you have 2 kids as well. If I remember from our last conversation, you recently had a second baby. That must have been definitely a challenge, thinking about having one, being a young adult, progressing into having one child and having 2 kids, and, your career and your becoming a parent is completely different, right? Like how you transform from one place to the other. So I want to ask both of you, what were the changes or are the changes you saw and you see now right off the bat?
Sure. I'll start with that one, Sarah, and you can chime in as we go. But
just because his kids are older.
Yeah, I started first. I gotta work harder to remember that far back. No, as I mentioned, my wife is a doctor. So at the time that we had our first kid, we waited a while, right? Med school, residency, not very conducive to having a kid. For most, I don't know, probably don't know this, but during your residency, if you take more than 2 weeks off throughout your resident year, which runs August 1st to July 31st, you have to repeat the year, right? So not all that beneficial for trying to, come out of giving birth and taking some time off to be with that kid, and any other potential challenges that happen with childbirth. So, as much as we could, we tried to time it close to that transition date of the year, that maybe we could get 4 weeks out of it. Naturally, we failed. My daughter was born September 1st, so we didn't miss by much, but still, nonetheless, we missed. So that was definitely a challenge, and something that changed right off the bat is now you don't have your job as the top priority, right? Or even it's only shared between one other priority, right? Your spouse, and for the first kid, at least, the spouse and the job are probably maybe not equal, but they're pretty close, right? There's just the two of them. You throw a kid into the mixture, and now there's 3 priorities that you're having to juggle that most of us give fairly equal weight to. And it's really not just you balancing for yourself. It's you coordinating and balancing with your spouse around the kid and the 2 careers and whatnot. So, that was definitely a conversation and change was, and I knew it going into it. We'd already talked about the changes that we were going to be making, but, I could not be out in the field past 6 o'clock. I had to be there to get the kid, except on the odd days that Colleen was done early, or she was coming off of being on call, and at the hospital for 30 hours, right? Then she was going to be home, but, I couldn't do it. So I had to have that conversation with my employer. We had to have the staff in place that could cover those projects or could come out and relieve me if need be. So it was just a lot of conversations, a lot of back and forth, and being upfront and open with everyone, my spouse, my employer. We didn't have family. We were in Minneapolis. We didn't have any family near us. It was her resident friends and some of my coworkers that helped out a little bit from time to time, but it's a
Man,
lot.
I want to interject there. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna play the old man card again. I got a chance to play it once. All right. So when we had kids, there was an unwritten expectation that the employer would not be inconvenienced. It was just unwritten, but it was like, okay, you had kids, but otherwise, I don't want to know. You're still expected to be at work at 8 and leave no earlier than 5. And you were expected to be able to drop everything in a moment's notice if the client said something. You know what I mean? And in fact, I remember very well, my wife and I had plans, and this wasn't kid related, but we had plans to go on vacation. It was a Friday night, and it was like 5:30 and the phone rang, and we were supposed to leave. And my boss comes in and says, "Hey, we just got a call. We need to do some analysis." And I look at the clock and I said, "Well, we're supposed to be leaving for vacation today." And he goes, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Do I need to stay?" And he goes, "Well, I'm not going to tell you what to do." Okay. I stayed.
Yeah.
And I want to bring Sarah into this conversation too. How much have times changed from that to what you experienced? Tell me.
I think they've changed. I think they've changed a lot. And Sarah's nodding, so that's cool. We agree. I think I was also very fortunate with the employer that I was with at that time. They very much had already adopted a pretty open schedule, right? There was no, you got to be here at 8 and you got to be here, if you got to be at your desk by 8 and you got to be at your desk at least until 5. It was, as long as the client's needs are met, work when you need to, work when you want. As long as we are not hearing complaints from the client that they are not being serviced in the way that they want to be, that they will come back to us on their next project. Cool.
Yeah, I guess to add to that, what Matt said very well. So there's like the bare minimum, right? So family comes first. If your kid is sick, we don't have a support network of family here either. So if they're sick, like nobody else is there to take them. They can't go to daycare. They're not going to survive. Like it's not even like a choice. And the employer, from my experience, has been very flexible with that. Thankfully, I think a lot of that, even colleagues after COVID and people getting used to working from home and flexible schedules, like I think it's built into the culture. But I think like even beyond that, there's like, mental health and personal like wellness and like satisfaction. I think if, in my perspective, I would have been bitter, Tim, if my boss said, you're missing your vacation, you have to do this. Like I would have carried bitterness with me for a year if I had to miss, an important vacation with my spouse. And I think I would have been not a very good employee. Yeah, I would have done the work, but I would have done so begrudgingly. And so, I think, luckily, at least in my recent experience, there's been, I think, a feeling that we care about the person's like whole self and trying to accommodate employees in a way that, it's a long-term investment. And I'm really, really thankful. I think I work at a company where they see us, as whole people, and we work really hard, but, the expectation is that, we're letting someone know when we have those conflicts, we are respecting each other's vacations. And I think for young, the new generation, even younger than myself, it's just a given in their eyes that they get to take their vacations. So the culture, it sounds like it's drastically changed.
I think it has. And I think it comes back to the point you brought about mental health, Sarah, in it. There's been so much more research on productivity and the benefits of people being in a good mental state, and the balance and the time away from work that our perspectives, and particularly employers' perspectives, have changed. That, yes, my taking a week off and that being respected and that being allowed and encouraged, and then coming back to work, I'm going to be more productive and I'm going to be a better employee. I'm going to be, happiness, employee satisfaction, and all that kind of stuff. I think the research now is out there that in the documentation, the financial benefits of it have been proven again and again. And that's caused a significant shift culturally, at least in the US.
No, that's very true. Going back to, everything that you, Sarah and Matt, you shared, the companies had to make a change, right? They had to make a change. Tim shared his story and where the mindset was at that time. And also, like, as we are going into new generation, there is, both the spouses have challenging jobs, have challenging careers, and they have aspirations, right? With family, bringing family along. If the employer is not ready to make that change and adapt to what is changing within the industry and within the needs of the employees, then you can say employees are not going to be happy and employers are not going to be in business anymore, if you think about it.
We expect to have it all, right? Like you have your career, you have your family, and, maybe both partners are working in these like challenging careers. And I'm thankful that that's, the culture, because, I'll share a little bit more about my experience, like with maternity leave and all of that. So, like when I told my boss the first time I was pregnant, I was so nervous. I was like sick to my stomach with anxiety. I had just gotten my PE, and, obviously I was excited about my career, and I was like, what is this going to do? Like, how are we going to handle this upcoming maternity leave? And, thankfully, my employer already had a really generous maternity leave policy. I wasn't even aware of it. I hadn't thought to ask, but 3 months full pay. I took an extra 2 weeks after that, of like paid vacation time. And, I felt nothing but like positivity and support. No one was, like begrudgingly like, okay, well, enjoy your time off. Like eating bonbons on the couch. Like they all like, were really kind. So, I feel, very lucky with that. When I came back, my baby was waking up 3 to 4 times a night. I was breastfeeding. I was exhausted. I was I was in survival mode. I really missed my baby. I had some like postpartum anxiety. It was just very like hard. Everything, it was so hard. And I imagine other people have experienced something similar or different. So within a couple of weeks, I was like, I'm at my breaking point. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm not sleeping. I'm exhausted. There was another female engineer that we had recently hired from consulting who had brought with her, like when she negotiated her contract, she was working 4 days a week. She had 3 little kids. She had a newborn. And I thought, like, that sounds pretty nice. Maybe I can negotiate something, similar. So I asked if I could reduce my hours. I did like half day Fridays. And I got paid less too, but I was able to be with my baby a little bit more, because honestly, if you have an infant, a newborn, you work until 5, you pick them up from daycare, you've got maybe an hour and a half with them every day. And, when you and your partner are working full time, you're cooking, you're cleaning, like, I was like, I can't live like this. This isn't enjoyable. I don't feel like myself. And that extra time with my baby, I felt like I was more productive. It was about getting my work done, not necessarily like my butt in the chair at the desk. So, that worked out, and I went back to full time when she was about a year old. So, my employer, they said, let's try it. Let's see how it goes. And, I did that with my second pregnancy as well. When I came back from maternity leave, slightly different schedule, but I reduced my hours as well. And in both instances, we had a check-in about 3 months in to the situation. And, I said, what do you think? And both times different managers said, you're doing fine. You're doing awesome. Like, you don't need to change a thing. And so I think that, it was a fair deal for both parties, and, it was temporary. And so I think that open mind, that meant so much, and it retained me. I don't know, you experience like so much, this roller coaster of experiences as a new parent, and to know we're going to work through this. This is temporary, and the super Sarah will be back shortly. I think it worked out.
No, I think, yeah, that's outstanding. I think there are a handful of companies that can afford to do this, and there are companies that don't want to do this. You hear more and more, you talk to the female engineers that you have, and also the male engineers, because they have their spouses who are in the industry as well and working towards fulfilling both the shoes, right? Filling both the shoes. And recently I was, I'm always on LinkedIn and stalking everyone. So recently there was a post on LinkedIn from an international huge company. This is a big company having offices all around the world. They just started, I don't remember what the program is called as, but they started a program for people like who couldn't afford to continue working and taking care of the kids. Because they couldn't balance, and they left the industry, and now they are building this program to bring them back, help them reconnect with the industry and grow in the industry. When I saw that program, I had not seen that any other company doing it, and that was very, happy. Really, I was happy to see that. If a company takes that step, that means that they actually value what engineers are bringing into the industry. That was very happy to see.
Well, we all know and are hearing that there's a shortage of people in our industry. And I think, employers are understanding that they've got to get creative, they've got to get flexible in order to staff in any way, shape, or form of that they need to, anywhere close to that. And Sarah, one of your comments made me think of, reflecting back on my experience, and we were incredibly fortunate that my wife didn't have any postpartum issues at all, because she took her 2 weeks and she went back. I took 2 weeks. My mom came up and took a week and a half. My mother-in-law came up and took a week and a half, and our kid was in daycare at 8 weeks, or 9 weeks, I think is actually what we made it to, but whatever, right? But I also thought about, heading into that, or heading into particularly later on when we went for the year for my wife to do her fellowship in Boston. Daycare in Boston was a week of daycare in Boston was twice the cost of daycare in Minneapolis for us. So we said, yeah, that's not going to happen. Well, what are we going to do? So I went part-time, and going into that, I'm very fortunate that my father worked in human resources at a corporate level for, Boise Cascade, Bausch and Lomb, and some other large firms. And he said, Matt, everything is negotiable. And he's right, but it is and it isn't. I think you and I, Sarah, were incredibly fortunate to be working at two companies that understood that and were open to that. I don't think, as Lucky brought up, that every company is as open to that as our two companies were, and that everything is negotiable, and we'll figure it out in some way, shape, or form. We'll make it happen. I think, Tim, when we were talking about doing this before, you brought up some experiences where that wasn't the case for you. It's
I think you hit a good point, and I didn't even really think about it until you brought it up, and that is that the market has changed. I mean, there's no doubt about it, and that's a good thing. I mean, when I graduated, we were in a recession, and there really wasn't an acknowledged shortage. In fact, I guess we were probably closer historically to the glut of engineering that occurred in kind of when NASA broke up in the mid 70s. There were a lot of engineers that were put on the street. And of course, I was at school in the late 80s. So, but you're right, now it's very difficult to get engineering candidates. I mean, at
any age or any experience level,
it's very hard to do.
It's a very competitive market.
I would rather believe that it is all driven by employers realizing that wasn't a very good way to treat their employees, but that may be a naive way to look at it.
A little bit too much
altruistic, a little too altruistic.
But Tim, I think that's a very, very fair point. And when we see a lot of young engineers who are coming into the industry, I'm not even saying that it's civil engineering, but any other industry, like the things that other industries are offering for younger generation is no match for what civil engineering industry or construction industry is offering. And we have seen that is probably one of the main reasons why we are not able to retain talent after 3 to 5 years.
Lucky, be more specific. You got to tell us. You said other careers are not offering what we're offering. Is that what are they offering that we aren't, or what are we offering that they don't get? Well, tell me which one it is. Be more.
Yeah. So if I can be specific, software. If you think about software industry is like, I'm not saying that they have figured it out, but they have streamlined what are the needs of the employees. If you think about because the employees spend a lot of time in the companies, right? So they are offering daycare services for the kids. So when parents come to the office, they take their kids with them, and then they drop it off at the daycare services, which is part of the company. So that makes a huge difference. If your kid is sick, you get a call and you run downstairs or down the street and you pick up your kid, figure out what's going on, right? That's number one. Number two, mental health. We did talk about mental health, right? Like mental health push has been a little slower in construction industry, if you think about, and it is a lot, has been little more momentum has been gained in the other industries. If you think software or if you think other industries. So for mental health, they're having yoga classes. once a week. They have a gym in the offices where they can actually go and join the gym. But if you think about comparing that with the engineering companies that we have, like in construction industry, I think there are certain companies that actually in New York City, I should say, I'm sure this is in California, big cities, where company is paying you to join the gym. They pay part of the gym membership, number one. Yep. Number two, I just joined Geocomp 7 weeks ago. This is my 8th week, I think, or maybe this is 7th week. They have a $300 gift card that is given to you if you go to the doctor, fill out, paperwork on your how your body is doing, how your mind is doing. And then if there are any differences or things that you have to work on, if you work on that in the next 3 months and go back to the doctor after 3 months and show improvement, you have to fill that form and you get $300 gift card. Doing things like this, I think motivating people and making them feel, being healthy, mental health and physical health, and the kids that I said, is outstanding. If we can do something like that to see how employees can be brought in and see their needs, how they're changing, and help them, support them to keep the change.
There's still a long ways to go. I think especially with field-based positions, I have examples of, parents who I work with in the office, and we have these flexible arrangements. We can work from home. We can leave early to pick our kid up or something on occasion. But, I don't have good examples of field engineers, superintendents who are also making that work. So, I think the challenge for retaining and attracting people into those roles is a very steep one. I've talked to women who are frustrated. They're in the field. They say, I don't know how I can have a baby, right? So they put off trying to have a baby, or they're looking to leave the company because they don't see a future raising a child, living in a different state on this job site. And so there's still a long ways to go.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think back to my career, right? I mean, I was actually fortunate that we, for other reasons, not me, but with where my wife was, that we had to put off having a kid until when we did. And that gave me the opportunity. I didn't have to worry about, what time it was that I got home. She was always getting home after me anyway. Right. If I came back to the office and no one had yet pulled the concrete cylinders from the tanks that needed to be broken that day, all right, fine. I'm pulling them, I'm capping them, I'm waiting for them, right. All that. So what? Doesn't matter. Nobody's at home, or I'm not missing out on something at home. So that was very fortunate. But I think where I'm seeing some changes in the industry in that regard is I think all of us would acknowledge and recognize just how important that field experience is. I know it was incredibly important for me. Tim, you and I have talked about it in the past as well. So we've got to find another way to get people that field experience, especially in the situation like me, never been around construction before that. Sarah, same thing, right? You've got to see it in order to understand it and be able to design it. I'm seeing a lot more companies take advantage of co-ops in that regard, in using the co-op experience as that field experience, that then when they're done with school, they can be more in the office and not as much out in the field. That doesn't totally take the place of the field engineer. There's still that need. So it's still a challenge, but some of that experience is getting replaced or supplemented, maybe not replaced, supplemented with the co-op program and going that route. But yeah, it's still a challenge.
Well, we have focused mainly on kind of probably on the life side of the work-life balance. So before, as we kind of get to the end of our podcast, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit, and let's start with Sarah. So Sarah, we've got folks out there that, I don't know, wherever they're at in their career, and they may have to make a change. You made a change from maybe a traffic engineering into geotech. Some people make a transition from technical to management. Some people make a transition from management to technical. Some people make a transition from field to technical, or from design. You get the feeling. tell me in your changes, I'm at, how stressful was it? And maybe some wisdom you would share with our listeners on how to deal with that transition in their career.
Yeah, Tim, I feel really passionately about communication. So I think, as you are navigating a change, be it personal, be it, a role, a challenge, I think finding a mentor, talking to your manager about, your performance, what are your goals? Luckily for me, I've had, really great mentors, lead designers in my company to look up to. Now I'm transitioning into more of a trainer. I've accepted a new position, and so again, as we change through these roles, it's important to communicate, to get feedback, and when it gets tough, just don't quit. Just keep going. One foot in front of the other. Yeah.
Very good. That was a great answer, Sarah. Okay, Matt, you're up. So
I'm gonna build off of Sarah. I mean,
all right, let's hear it.
Communication is absolutely huge. Early, often, open communication. And going into it with not from the mindset of what you can't do or what your employer can't do with any preconceived notion. Go into it from the perspective of what can you do, and ask that of your employer. Okay, what can we do, right? Your manager and the employer. What are the options? And it's not, don't think of it as it's this fixed option, it's this fixed option, and it's this fixed option, and maybe another one, right? It could be some combination of those 3 and 4, and you've got to work together to figure that out and hash through it. But having the conversation or starting the conversation early. I know Sarah mentioned that she was so apprehensive about going in and talking about such a wonderful thing of, I'm pregnant, this is awesome. But, and that's a horrible thing. And I'm sorry that you had that anxiety. But right, people are going to have that as much as you can, and as much as I can encourage people not to. I know it's still going to happen, but don't be afraid of it. Talk about it before you're even pregnant. Hey, we're thinking about having kids. We're thinking about doing this in our life. We're thinking about adopting. We're thinking about whatever it is. It could even be not necessarily with your family. Like, I'm thinking about my parents are getting old, and at some point here, we're going to have to take care of them. And oh yeah, there's not just my parents, but there's my in-laws, and they don't have any kids. So it's my wife and I, right? It's all, I got 4 or whatever it is. Start those conversations early. You never know when you're going to need to know what the options are. And once you've started to talk about them, it breaks down some barriers, especially if you're doing it early when there isn't a crunch of, we've got to figure this out now. We don't have, we got 2 weeks. If you've been talking about it for a year and planning for it and prepping for it, then things are known. I think about, my changes along the way of, I hooked down with Braun Intertech in Minneapolis, right? We knew we were going to be there for 5 years for her residency. I never hid that. That was open with them, telling them all along, I don't know where we're going to end up. I don't know what we're going to do. Year 1, fellowship wasn't even on the radar. Year 3, it was on the radar. We were starting to apply. I don't know where we're going to go. We're going to match into somewhere. I don't know if there's going to be a Braun office there or not. So what are my options? My wife and I, as we were going into that final year of her residency, I said, look, to be fair to my employer and to my career, I got to know where we're going to be at the end of our 1-year fellowship. Are we going to be back in Minneapolis, or are we going to be St. Louis was the other option? Which one are we going to do? We need to figure that out before we go, because it's going to have an impact. If we're coming back to Minneapolis, Braun's probably going to keep me on, and we'll make it work for that year that I'm in Boston. If we're going to be in St. Louis, it's probably, hey, thanks, good 5 years, and we're moving on. Shock of all shock to me when I went in and told them I'm going to be in Boston for a year and then I'm going to move to St. Louis. It was, okay, what do we got to do to make it work?
Wow.
So, and I worked remotely for Braun for 12 years from St. Louis. Wow. We never had an office here. Wow. It was me, myself, and I. It was a great office, except when myself was acting odd,
those are all wonderful lessons learned, right? Wonderful lessons learned. And I think this is a very good starting point for younger engineers, and for some of the engineers who are going through this right now. At
any point in our careers, I think it's good information to remind ourselves of.
Definitely.
Our life work balance is always changing. There's always new things coming in. We're always getting into different, we talked about, Tim brought up at the beginning that we're, different phases of career, right? We're always changing.
What I'd like to do now is just have a quick round robin and let our guests and Lucky give our parting shots. Sarah, you're first up.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Something Matt said earlier to me about like aging parents, it really resonated. And I think, something I experienced last year, I lost my mom to Alzheimer's disease when I had this newborn. It was really, a hard place. And I was really grateful to understand that my company had a bereavement policy. I didn't even know what that was, but, that was just another way that the company was able to support me, as a whole person. I was really grateful for that. So I think, just anything employers can do to embrace these changes that we go through. We're not just employees, we're people. And so like as human resources, I think anything companies can do to have a plan to take care of those resources goes such a long way. I've seen it in my own career. I'm very grateful, that I've been supported through all of these changes.
Sarah, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Matt, what do you got for us in closing?
So I think I'm going to go back to the title of this program, Interview with a Trailblazer. I certainly do not view myself as a trailblazer, but as I kept thinking about that overall and my uncomfortableness with it, we are each blazing our own trail through our career and through our life, and balancing our family, whatever shape it takes, with our career, whatever shape it takes in whatever part of the industry it's in. And we've got to recognize that, and we don't always recognize that. But building on what Sarah said of, companies making their policies known, individuals need to ask too, right? The communication that we've talked about a few times, bring it up. I would, ask the questions that you need to ask of what point you're going through and how to navigate that. Ask your friends at your company, outside of your company, ask your classmates, whatever it happens to be, whatever stage you're at in your career. We all grow up. A lot of us have kids, not all of us. I'm going to say that we all have parents, so that, our parents get old and go through those different phases. We're going to have friends that get ill from cancer or whatever it happens to be. And, maybe it happens to your spouse or a close family member, and dealing with that, talk to your friends about it, ask your employer about it. And for those of us that are not just employees at a company, but maybe leaders or managers within that company, as much as you can, tell your employees what the options are. Remind them, even if it's not because somebody comes to you with a problem, but in a staff meeting, July, for whatever reason, hey, just want to go through our policies just to make sure you guys know and gals know what's out there that we have. Did you guys know we have reimbursement for gym membership, or our family medical leave policies, or whatever else it happens to be, the mental health support that you have. I know, various points I've had employees that have needed to use those different things. And I was always happy that I knew where to go to get the resource and put them in the right place to help themselves. So talk to each other, communicate. It's huge.
Those are wonderful.
Thank you, Matt.
Those are wonderful points, I would say. Thanks for sharing that, how you can use the internal company policies and talking to the leaders and mentors that you have. And the other one I want to add to that as the closing is, there are plenty of women's groups. I want to bring it up because what Sarah just talked about, having a second baby, and during her first pregnancy as well, going on short not having 40 hours, but having 30 hours or 32 hours a week is something that you don't know. Can you ask? How are you going to ask? So in the last few months, I've seen like 3 members of Women in D Foundations who came to me. I don't have kids. I never had to have that kind of conversation with my employer, but they came up to me and then asked me like, hey, what do you think about this? How do you think my career is going to affect when I'm going to go and talk about this to my manager? That's when I realized I knew, Sarah, that you had gone through that. So it was easy brainer for me. And then I connected the person who asked me that question to Sarah to talk about it. And fortunately, they both are in Pittsburgh. So, they could talk to each other and figure out like how this can be used for their benefit, and also see how this can not have any inconvenience, as Tim was talking about, for the company as well. So these groups, and also like the companies have been coming up with their own women's groups, right? And their own resource groups, not just women's groups. Langen, for example, has many resource centers, if you think about it, and GEI has it, and many companies have it in the industry now. So having those things and having people to within your company and outside your company, having those conversations makes a lot of difference for your future, career future and personal future as well. So thank you both for sharing everything that you shared today, which is, some of it is definitely sensitive, but we are really thankful for our listeners to gain the wisdom from that and the path for future.
I'm not sure I'd call it wisdom, but nonetheless, Thanks for having us. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you both. Take care.
On behalf of DFI, we hope you enjoyed this episode. The views, information, and opinions expressed during Deep Foundation Institute's podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of DFI. DFI does not verify or take responsibility for the accuracy of the information contained, nor does it warrant that the information contained herein is suitable for any general or specific use. The podcast is available for private, non-commercial use only. Editing, modification, or redistribution of this podcast is prohibited. Thank you for your time. Keep on surviving.